Thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet Voice You Know It, the News You Trust studio, sponsored by Grain Equipment Company, where innovation meets execution. I'm Dale Menyo. Thanks to all of you who stopped by and said hello yesterday at the Farm Science Review. Today's day number 2. Weather looks about the same for today, so you won't need a jacket later today, but depending on the morning temperature, we're at 64 this morning, a little warmer than yesterday, so I'm going to guess you don't need a jacket. But we'll see you at the review today. Interest rates on farm loans are at a multi-decade high, and many hope relief will come this afternoon. For the past 2 years, farmers have been paying interest rates above the 30-year average. The Federal Reserve is widely expected to cut interest rates for the first time since its inflation battle began in 2022. But what's uncertain is the size of the cut, whether it's a quarter percentage point or a half a percentage point. Currently, the federal fund rates are at 5.25 and 5.5%. Higher interest rates have hit the ag sector much harder than the rest of the economy, said DTN lead analyst Todd Haltman. In addition to increasing farmers' operating costs, higher interest rates also help fuel fund managers' record short positions in corn, soybeans, and wheat earlier this year. Haltman said lower interest rates could help provide some relief to farmers in a couple of ways. Farmers in the Kansas City Federal Reserve District paid an average interest rate of nearly 9% in 2024. Haltman would like to see a larger cut this week and follow with a swift reduction in rates, but warns the Fed may opt for caution. They don't want any reinflation of consumer prices to occur, he said. The Fed's favorite inflation index, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index, has held annual inflation at 2.5% since July. Haltman said energy prices make up a large component of that index, and crude oil prices have recently fallen or slowed. The U.S. is producing a record 13.3 million barrels of oil a day. At the same time, there are signs of slowing economic growth in China weighing on demand. Today's weather brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
While we do not see a pattern change short term, we do have a glimmer of hope for maybe a bit of moisture late in the weekend. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin with a look at your Ohio Ag weather update. Nearby, more of the same. Sunny, very warm, very dry. Humidity values up. Evaporation rates are high, but there's nothing to evaporate out of the soil profile, so we're just sucking moisture out of plants and vegetation. That continues today, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday. But I do think we have some changes later in the weekend. There is a significant weather system, big round of thunderstorm activity that develops in the Central Plains and into Iowa and the Missouri Valley as we move through the later part of this weekend. And it kicks out to the east with a little bit stronger of a surge eastward. That means I'm comfortable saying now I think we see rain develop in Indiana Sunday midday, Ohio Sunday late afternoon and evening, and we can see on-again, off-again showers through Monday and even into early Tuesday. Combined anywhere from a quarter to maybe 1.5 inches with coverage at, we'll call it 80% of Ohio. There will be some holes, but it's probably the best chance at moisture that we've seen in the forecast in a little while. Right after it's done, we go back to dry, and we see a big upper-level ridge over most of the country. So this isn't going to be a long-term pattern change, but at least a chance at a drink. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that can hold and get in here. I'm meteorologist Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. Yesterday at the Farm Science Review, Joel Panorwood caught up with someone to talk specifically about what a lot of people are already talking about, the potential for fires this fall in the field.
Anna Hall Stroud of Paul Hall and Associates. And Anna, that's extremely on the forefront of our minds this year, and that's field fires. And what do we need to know? Where do we even begin with this conversation?
I think the first step is to being conscious and aware of it. Sometimes we get in our heads and we don't think this year is any different just because it's a little drier, but it's a lot different. The dust is much thicker. It lays in places much longer. So we have to be more cognizant of how to take care of our equipment, how to go slow and steady in the field, and be much more aware of our surroundings. So if something does erupt in some form of fire and smoke, we see it through the dust instead of being too far gone to save it.
Oh, well said. And it hits close to home. Just last week, my family was harvesting, getting some soybeans, opened up, and suddenly field fire broke out. New combine and everything. Things seemed to be going along really well. Then suddenly the wind takes it, and it took out a good portion of the field. Thankfully, local firefighters were on hand. Nobody was hurt. No equipment damage. But it brings to mind some of those questions. How does land ownership matter? Does the start of the fire, is how that started matter? All these other things that maybe you can illuminate for
Sure,
us.
yes, I'll do my best. A lot of times it'll depend on how the fire started and what is covered, who is covering it, who's going to be liable, who's not liable. More times than not, the actual landowner is not going to be the person at fault unless they're also the one that's actually harvesting the field. So let's use a combine fire for an example. It's probably the one we most well understand. And if a combine kind of, whether it's a bearing that goes out or dust has created an issue, whatever the case is, we now have a fire, the combine burns up. The goal is to get out of it safely and let the combine burn, first and foremost. Let the combine burn. Secondly, the second goal was to try and keep anything around the combine from burning. So we're telling a lot of our guys, take water to the fields with you. Do what you can to try and protect it after the fire has started. But if the field burns up because you weren't able to get it out or you didn't learn about the fire soon enough, now you're just saving yourself. Let it burn, and then we'll deal with the repercussions at that point. Hopefully you have grain coverage on your farm policy. That's going to be the first question you should talk to your insurance agent about, because then any unharvested crop or crop in the combine is going to be covered with that coverage. Now let's say it burns over the ditch line to the neighboring field, and now you've basically had some fire damage to the neighbor crops. Most farm policies have that liability built in, so if they say that you're liable for it, which if it was your combine that started the fire, you probably are, you're going to have some coverage to take care of them as well.
What are those questions that we don't even know to ask, but you as an insurance expert would be able to, and you just illuminate several of those, but what should we be asking maybe while we're thinking and having some time in those combines that are not on fire, but my goodness, they're probably pretty dusty.
Yes, I think the biggest thing is if you've got a second, call up your insurance agent and just say, hey, walk me through what's on my policy. Is the combine covered? Is the header cart covered? Is the semi that's hauling the grain covered? Just walk through what you're seeing, what you're actually visualizing while you're sitting in there. And then ask some of the questions of, hey, if something does happen, do I have coverage for the grain? If something happens, am I okay if someone gets hurt? Whether they were in the combine or trying to help put out the fire. So just kind of critically think through what you're visibly seeing when you're riding in that combine harvesting.
Anna Hall Stroud of Paul Hall and Associates.
And thank you, Joel Penorwood. Back with more after this.
Get ready for the 62nd Annual Farm Science Review, September 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's more than a farm show. Explore over 600 exhibitors across 2.6 million square feet, providing equipment, services, and education for farms of all types and sizes. Tickets can be purchased at participating OSU Extension offices and agribusinesses, as well as online. Visit fsr.osu.edu to buy your Farm Science Review tickets now and plan your show visit. We look forward to seeing you at the 62nd Farm Science Review, September 17th, 18th, and 19th.
Soybeans grown in Ohio and across the heartland are meeting the feedstock demand for clean fuels. Biodiesel is a clean burning and reliable fuel that enhances engine life, power, and mileage. Plus, this high-performance fuel works in any diesel engine without modification. With biodiesel, we fuel the economy, do good for the environment, and support soybean farmers. Learn how using biodiesel can add value to every bushel of soybeans grown at soyohio.org. And a couple notes on the calendar. Don't forget, today we'll be at Farm Science Review, all thanks to Morton Buildings. On Thursday, tomorrow, Dusty will get an update on the results are in from the first-of-its-kind survey about farm stress in Ohio. Get a preview of the results for Ohio. Ohio's Agriculture Mental Health Alliance Farm Stress Survey. It includes what is stressing farmers out and how they maintain their mental wellness. And again, that's Thursday from the Farm Science Review. And on Friday, we'll be at the Ashland County Fair, and Axis Seed will also be there presenting their final Junior Fair Check presentation of the year. As we check out other notes, it's been just 1 year since the formation of a partnership to create what is the nation's first large-scale sustainable aviation fuel chain in Minnesota, and a Delta Airlines representative said on Monday that the partnership was just the beginning. Jeff Davidman, Vice President of Government Affairs for Delta Airlines, said during the Agriculture Outlook Forum in Kansas City, Missouri, that the Minnesota project is helping all parts for the future SAF value chain to learn what works. Davidman described the Minnesota hub as like an incubator program for one state, looking all the way from the farm all the way to the plain and everything in between. The partnership in Minnesota recently announced several accomplishments in the past year that the partnership, now including Bank of America, Delta, Ecolab, Xcel Energy, and others. According to a news release from the partnership, work on the facility is expected to be completed in the fourth quarter of 25. The facility is expected to be the first SAF blending plant between the coast, and Shell is expected to supply the SAF. Time now for the Louis Dreyfus Grain Analysis, brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff. Here's Ryan Martin.
Grain markets finishing mixed on Tuesday. Taking a look at the numbers, corn up a penny or two, beans up a penny or two. Chicago and KC wheat both down. Spring wheat up just a little bit. Kind of a sluggish day overall. The market did not really see a lot of massive change activity. The way we opened was close to the way we closed overall. Wheat contracts were forced to contend with a lot of selling in the Paris milling wheat futures and the ongoing absence of any upward momentum on Russia's cash market. Corn and soybeans put a little weather premium on, I think. It really wasn't much of any other kind of a premium. Exports are still non-existent here in the U.S. The market is focusing, or at least trying to transition into focusing, on yields. We had been talking about record or near record numbers earlier in the season, but you know what? This Eastern Corn Belt flash drought is really taking the top end off of the crop across the entire country. So that's going to be an interesting scenario to watch unfold. Yesterday's volume was pretty mediocre overall. We did get a little bit of news out of the South American area. CONAB took its first stab at new crop production, putting the Brazil 2024-25 bean crop at 166.3 million metric tons. That's large, big, but it's not as big as what USDA says, which is 169. Corn production put in at 119.8, so just shy of 120. USDA currently at 127. Here's the thing on the Brazilian numbers, though. You can't really zero in on Brazilian production and output until you get a look at their exports. And when you get the exports in, you figure out what they really produced, and exports don't really get going until about 8 to 10 months after the crop season is done. So I would say let's not give a whole lot of guff about the numbers just yet, but we're probably going to have to pay attention to these as we go forward. The daily reporting system was void of new export sales yesterday. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. After a teeter-totter market yesterday, we did end up with December corn up a penny and 3/4 at $4.12.5. The November new crop beans were up a penny and a half at $10.06. And as we look to December wheat, if you're still carrying it, it was down 2 3/4 at $5.75 3/4. Let's go to the overnight, where it's all positive. December corn up a penny and a half at $4.14. Next March up a penny and a half, $4.32 1/4. November beans, $10.18 3/4, up 12 3/4. January up 12 3/4, trading $10.37.5. And if you carry it clear out to March, you're at $10.52, up 12 3/4. On wheat, December up 1 at $5.76 3/4. July new crop up a penny and a half overnight at $6.13 3/4. In livestock, October cattle $178.80, up $1.57. December $179.85, up $1.50, and all the way out to February at $181, up $1.52. October lean hogs up $185 at $81.77. December $73.70, up $1.52, and February $76.80, up $1.12. October feeder cattle closed up $175 to $240.75, and November up $2.72 and closed out at $238.30. October Class 3 milk, $23.96 this morning. That's trading up 6 cents. Well, I guess the only thing I didn't talk about this morning that might be of interest, there were some harvest updates that happened during the conversations that came through the barn yesterday. The lowest soybean moisture, I heard, started with a 6. So 6-point-some% in the soybeans, so extremely low. So even if there's some leaves out there, maybe you ought to check that crop and see if it is ready to go. The yields in beans were all over the place. Most of them were on the disappointing side. Rarely did we catch anybody that seemed to got enough moisture for the whole season to be looking at what they were expecting out of the field. And on the corn side of things, things were slow to start and not many people talking about yields in corn. Thanks for joining us. See you at the Farm Science Review. This is the Ohio AgNet.